The slap echoed through courtroom 7B like a thunderclap. Judge Harlan Voss didn't even flinch. Officer Reed Callahan, the bailiff who had just struck Professor Layla Bennett across the face, smirked as she stumbled backward. Her briefcase hit the marble floor, papers scattered everywhere. Callahan stood 6'3", his hand still raised, badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Stay in your place," he hissed loud enough for everyone to hear. Layla's cheek burned crimson. The dozen spectators, mostly white, mostly silent, looked away. One woman whispered to her husband. The court reporter's fingers froze over her steno machine, but Layla didn't cry. She didn't scream. She straightened her collar, touched the small pin on her lapel, and smiled. Have you ever been humiliated in a place where you expected justice, only to realize the system itself was rigged against you? This is one of those real-life stories that changes everything. Earlier that morning, Layla Bennett had walked into the Fulton County Courthouse with her head high and her expectations measured. At 34, she had learned not to expect too much from institutions. Still, she believed in trying. She was there for a routine civil hearing, representing herself in a landlord dispute over withheld security deposits. She wore a navy suit, cream blouse, and carried a leather portfolio. Professional, prepared. But the moment she passed through the metal detector, Officer Reed Callahan singled her out from the crowd. "Ma'am, step aside. Random search." 3 white attorneys behind her walked through without a second glance. Layla complied without protest. Callahan emptied her bag item by item, dropping her toiletries and protein bar carelessly. He let her laptop thud against the plastic bin. "You a lawyer?" His tone carried pure disbelief. "Yes, public defender turned private practice." He'd already decided her worth. He grunted and waved her through without another word. Layla collected her belongings and headed to the waiting area. These were the kinds of black stories that played out every day in courtrooms across America. Small humiliations, tiny cuts that accumulated over time. In the waiting area, she sat alone on a wooden bench. A court clerk called names alphabetically. She skipped Bennett 3 times. When Layla finally approached the desk, the clerk, a white woman in her 50s with a name tag reading Brenda, didn't look up. "Your case isn't until later. The docket says morning slot." Brenda sighed theatrically. "Well, the judge is running behind. Go wait." Layla returned to her bench. She checked her phone. A message notification flashed across the screen. Board meeting confirmed. She dismissed it quickly and reviewed her case notes. Photos of black mold, text messages from her landlord admitting the apartment was uninhabitable, hotel receipts from the weeks she'd been forced to find other accommodation. When her name was finally called, she entered courtroom 7B with her evidence organized and her arguments rehearsed. Judge Harlan Voss, a white man in his early 60s with a reputation for being harsh on self-represented litigants, barely acknowledged her entrance. The landlord's attorney, Kevin Pritchard, a partner at Pritchard & Stone, greeted the judge like an old friend. "Your Honor, good to see you. How's your golf game?" They chatted about the weather and upcoming tournaments while Layla stood at the defendant's table waiting. Finally, Judge Voss turned his attention to the case. Layla presented her evidence methodically. She showed photographs of black mold creeping up the bathroom walls. She submitted text messages where her landlord had written, "Yeah, the plumbing's been bad for months. I'll get to it eventually." She provided hotel receipts totaling thousands. Judge Voss interrupted her mid-presentation. "Ms. Bennett, did you have legal representation when you signed this lease?" "No, Your Honor, but the lease itself contains—" "Then you should have known what you were agreeing to." The landlord's attorney smirked. Layla felt the familiar weight of bias settling over the courtroom like fog. But she pressed on. She cited Fair Housing Act violations. She referenced state tenant protection statutes. Her voice remained measured, professional. Judge Voss kept glancing at his watch. "Ms. Bennett, I've heard enough. Your claim is—" "Your Honor, I have one more exhibit. Security camera footage showing the landlord entering my apartment without notice on 4 separate occasions." "Approach the bench." His voice hardened. Layla walked forward. Callahan, who had been standing near the judge's platform, shifted position to block her path. She sidestepped. He moved again. "Excuse me, officer." "Don't rush the judge." His hand rested on his belt. As Layla opened her portfolio at the bench, a thin platinum card slipped out. The American Express Centurion, black card. Callahan caught a glimpse. His eyes narrowed slightly, but he said nothing. Judge Voss leaned close, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Miss Bennett, I suggest you accept whatever settlement Mr. Pritchard offers. You're not going to win this. Because my case lacks merit, or because you've already decided? The courtroom went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the carpet. Judge Voss's face reddened. Excuse me. I'm simply asking for clarification, Your Honor. Bailiff, escort Miss Bennett back to her seat. I'm holding her in contempt. $500 fine. Layla didn't move. On what grounds? Disrupting these proceedings. I cited legal precedent. That's my right under. Callahan grabbed her arm roughly. Let's go. Layla pulled away, her movement gentle but firm. Don't touch me. That's when Callahan slapped her. The sound cracked through the courtroom like breaking glass. One spectator, an older black man in the back row, jumped to his feet. What the hell? Judge Voss pounded his gavel. Order, Officer Callahan was maintaining decorum. Layla's cheek throbbed. She tasted blood from her split lip, but her eyes stayed locked on the judge with absolute clarity. She reached slowly into her jacket pocket. Callahan tensed, his hand moving toward his weapon. She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen twice, set it on the defense table. Recording light blinking red. The room held its breath. Within moments, the first video hit Twitter. A spectator's shaky phone footage showed everything. The slap, Layla's bleeding lip, Judge Voss's indifference. The caption read, Bailiff assaults black attorney in Fulton County Courtroom. Judge does nothing. Layla's name started trending. People began recognizing her, though not everyone could place exactly why she seemed familiar. Comments flooded in from attorneys across Georgia. Wait, is that Layla Bennett? The Layla Bennett. Holy, that bailiff just messed up big time. One tweet included a photograph from years earlier. Layla shaking hands with a senator at a civil rights gala. The caption identified her as a keynote donor. Inside the courtroom, Judge Voss realized phones were out and recording. His face went pale, then red. Bailiff, confiscate any recording devices immediately. Callahan lunged toward the gallery. The older black man who had shouted, a retired postal worker named Gerald, held his phone high above his head. You want to hit me too? Go ahead. Make it worse. Courthouse security arrived within minutes. The head officer, Captain Sophia Park, a black woman with years on the force, stepped into the chaos and assessed the scene instantly. Layla's bleeding lip, Callahan's defensive posture, the judge's barely controlled fury, phones everywhere. What happened here? Her voice cut through the noise. Judge Voss spoke first. The defendant became belligerent. Officer Callahan subdued her appropriately within his authority. Layla's voice came steady as granite. He struck me without provocation in front of witnesses. It's on video, multiple angles from multiple phones. Captain Park's jaw tightened. She knew Layla from somewhere, though she couldn't immediately place the connection. But something about the woman's calm certainty made her proceed carefully. Ms. Bennett, do you need medical attention? I need a formal complaint filed against Officer Callahan and a misconduct report submitted regarding Judge Voss's conduct. The landlord's attorney, Pritchard, tried to de-escalate. Your Honor, perhaps we should recess. Layla turned to him. Her voice dropped low. Mr. Pritchard, you're about to witness what happens when institutional arrogance meets real accountability. She tapped the small geometric pin on her lapel. Just a brief touch. Captain Park's eyes went wide. She recognized that symbol now. Her entire demeanor shifted. Your Honor, Captain Park said carefully, I'm going to recommend we pause these proceedings pending a full investigation. Judge Voss slammed his gavel. Captain, I don't take recommendations in my own courtroom. With respect, Your Honor, this is now a potential criminal matter. It's out of your hands. Layla gathered her scattered papers methodically, every movement deliberate. Your Honor, I'm withdrawing from this hearing under duress. I'll be filing motions in federal court by end of business today. Judge Voss sneered. You do that, and I'll see you disbarred for contempt of court. I don't think you will. Something in her tone, absolute certainty without arrogance, made even Callahan hesitate. Layla walked toward the exit. Callahan moved to block her one more time. Move, she whispered it just loud enough for him to hear, because what happens in the next moments will define the rest of your career. Choose wisely. Callahan's bravado faltered. Something in her eyes, that quiet power, made him step aside. Layla walked out of courtroom 7B with her head high and blood still trickling from her lip. The hallway swarmed with people, spectators from other courtrooms, journalists who had been covering different cases. Word traveled fast in the courthouse. Ms. Bennett, will you press charges? Are you suing the county? Was this racially motivated? Layla raised one hand. The crowd quieted. I'll have a statement within the hour. Until then, no comment. A young black law student, maybe 23, pushed through nervously. I just Googled you. You're on the board of... She stopped, her eyes going wide. Layla smiled softly. Not yet officially. Give it minutes. She walked to the parking garage alone, sat in her car, pressed an ice pack to her swelling cheek. Her phone showed missed calls. She answered one. Yes, Marcus, I'm fine. No, don't release the statement yet because I want them to think they got away with it for another hour. She opened her laptop right there in the dim parking garage, pulled up courthouse security footage she had subpoenaed weeks earlier for a completely different case, a pro bono wrongful termination suit she had been working. The courthouse system was all connected. The footage captured everything from a different angle. Callahan's slap, her restrained response, the judge's complicity. She uploaded it to a private server with timestamps and sent copies to 6 different recipients: the Georgia Bar Association, the FBI Civil Rights Division, the Southern Poverty Law Center, her own attorney. Yes, her own attorney, because Layla Bennett hadn't been representing herself out of necessity. She had chosen to walk into that courtroom alone. She had chosen to test the system to see exactly how far the bias ran, to become the evidence herself. She hadn't expected to be struck, but she wasn't surprised. Back inside the courthouse, Judge Voss and Officer Callahan met in chambers. The judge poured bourbon into a crystal glass. Think she'll actually file anything? Callahan asked, his earlier confidence returning now that Layla was gone. She's a solo practitioner, an ambulance chaser. She'll make noise for a few days, then settle quietly. They always do. His clerk knocked, opened the door without waiting for permission. Your Honor, there's a situation. Channel 5. News is in the lobby. State Bar investigators just arrived, and someone from the Attorney General's office is asking for you. Judge Voss's glass slipped. Bourbon splattered across his oak desk, soaking into legal pads and case files. Outside, the hits kept climbing. The video had been viewed hundreds of thousands of times. Real stories like this one were rare. Stories where the victim didn't just survive, but fought back strategically. The comment sections filled with people sharing their own experiences, their own touching stories of discrimination in courtrooms across the country. And Layla Bennett sat in her car, ice pack pressed to her face, and smiled. At the cafe 3 blocks from the courthouse, Layla sat in a corner booth. She had changed her shirt. The blood was gone. Makeup covered most of the bruising. She looked like she was preparing for a business meeting, not recovering from an assault. Her laptop was open. Her phone buzzed constantly. She ignored most of it. Her legal partner, Marcus Rivera, slid into the booth across from her. You're trending nationwide. CNN wants an interview. So does MSNBC. The ACLU just called me directly. Tell them I'll have a statement by evening. Marcus, you should go to the hospital. Get checked out. Document everything. Already done. I stopped at urgent care. Full medical report, photographs, all documented and time-stamped. Marcus leaned back, studying her. They had been partners for years. He knew that look. You planned this. Not the assault, but I planned to test the system. I knew Voss's reputation. I knew about Callahan's complaint record. I wanted to see it firsthand. You used yourself as bait. I used myself as evidence. Layla pulled up a file on her laptop, turned the screen toward Marcus. Weeks ago, I got an anonymous tip. Someone sent me a flash drive with raw case data from Fulton County Courthouse. Outcomes sorted by race, gender, representation status. Courtroom 7B stood out. The spreadsheet filled the screen. Rows and rows of data, color-coded, analyzed. Black female litigants in Voss's courtroom win far fewer cases than white female litigants. Same types of cases, controlled for representation and claim strength. That's a significant disparity. Marcus whistled low. That's statistically impossible without systemic bias. Exactly. So I spent weeks building the case, filed public records requests, interviewed dozens of people who had lost cases in that courtroom, discovered that Officer Callahan had multiple excessive force complaints over the years, all against black defendants, all dismissed or ruled unfounded. Multiple complaints, and he's still working. That's deliberate indifference. It establishes a pattern which means the county is liable under Section 1983, municipal liability for constitutional violations. Marcus shook his head slowly. You engineered this. I positioned myself. When my landlord dispute came up and I saw it was assigned to Voss's courtroom, I recognized the opportunity. I could have hired counsel. I could have requested a different judge. Instead, I walked in alone and pushed every button I could within legal boundaries. You wanted them to discriminate against you. I wanted to document what happens to people without power when they walk into that courtroom. People who don't have resources or legal training. People who get crushed by the system every single day. Layla closed her laptop, met Marcus's eyes. Here's what they don't know yet. What nobody knows except you and a few others. She reached into her bag, pulled out an embossed leather folder, opened it to reveal official letterhead. Layla Bennett was printed at the top. Below it, Commissioner, Georgia Judicial Qualifications Commission. Marcus's eyes went wide. You're on the JQC, the board that disciplines judges, appointed years ago. I've kept it quiet, worked mostly behind the scenes, but yes, I'm literally on the panel that can remove Judge Voss from the bench. Does he know? He's about to find out. Layla pulled up another document. And this gets better. You know that board meeting I have later. It's not just any board meeting. Tonight, the Thurgood Marshall Leadership Council announces its new chairperson. That's me. We're a nationwide coalition of civil rights attorneys. We coordinate systemic litigation. We fund test cases. Annual operating budget of millions. Marcus sat back hard. So when you walked into that courtroom this morning, you weren't a struggling solo practitioner representing herself because she couldn't afford counsel. You were senior partner at Bennett & Associates, dozens of attorneys, high success rate in federal civil rights cases. You were an incoming chair of one of the most powerful legal advocacy organizations in the country. You were a sitting member of the Judicial Oversight Commission. And you let them treat you like you were nobody, because that's how they treat people they think are nobody. I wanted them to show me exactly who they are, and they did, on camera with witnesses, in a way that can't be explained away or dismissed. Layla's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Captain Park just submitted her incident report. She's recommending criminal charges against Callahan and a formal JQC investigation into Voss. She recognized your pin, didn't she? The Thurgood Marshall Council emblem. Eventually, that's why she backed off. What about that black card that fell out? The Centurion? Layla smiled slightly. Last year, I won a multi-million-dollar settlement against a national retailer for systematic racial profiling. That case changed corporate policy across thousands of stores. The Centurion card is just a side effect. Marcus laughed, but it was tinged with disbelief. So you're not just powerful, you're powerfully powerful. I'm strategic. There's a difference. Her phone buzzed again. This time she answered, Yes, I'll be there in minutes. Have the full presentation ready. All data, all documentation. I want them to see everything. She hung up, looked at Marcus. The county wants an emergency session. County administrator, their legal counsel, the judge, Callahan. They want to resolve this quietly. You going? Of course. This is where it gets interesting. What do you want from them? Layla's expression hardened, not with anger, but with absolute clarity of purpose. I want accountability. I want reform. I want them to understand that what happened today wasn't an isolated incident. It's part of a pattern, and patterns can be changed. She stood, gathered her things. Come with me. You'll want to see this. See what? What happens when people who've never faced consequences finally have to? They walked back toward the courthouse administration building. Layla moved with quiet confidence. No rush, no visible anger, just purposeful momentum. On the way, Marcus asked the question that had been bothering him. What if they'd recognized you immediately? What if Callahan or Voss had known who you were? Layla stopped walking, turned to face him. Then they would have treated me with basic respect, not because I deserved it as a human being, but because I had power. That's the problem, Marcus. Dignity shouldn't be conditional on status. Justice shouldn't depend on who you know or what you can afford. The system is broken, and today I'm going to use every bit of power I have to force them to fix it. A news van pulled up to the curb. A reporter jumped out, recognized Layla, rushed over with a microphone. Ms. Bennett, can you comment on what happened this morning? Layla stopped, looked directly into the camera. In approximately an hour, I'll be meeting with Fulton County officials. After that meeting, I'll have a full statement. Until then, I'll say this. What happened to me this morning happens to countless people every single day. The only difference is that I have resources to fight back. My goal isn't justice for myself. It's systemic change so that what happened today can never happen again. Are you suing? I'm demanding accountability. The form that takes will depend entirely on how seriously the county takes this moment. She walked away, leaving the reporter standing there. Marcus caught up to her. You're playing this perfectly. I'm not playing anything. I'm executing a strategy I've been building for months. They think this is about one slap, one moment of violence. It's not. It's about years of data, dozens of interviews, a pattern of discrimination so clear that no jury in America would side with them. They reached the administration building. Layla paused at the entrance, checked her reflection in the glass door. The bruise on her cheek was visible despite the makeup. She didn't try to hide it. Good, she said softly. Let them see what they did. They walked inside together, ready for war, but not the kind fought with fists or weapons. The kind fought with data, legal precedent, and the quiet, devastating power of being absolutely right. Conference Room C in the Fulton County Administrative Building was designed to intimidate. Long mahogany table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Atlanta. Normally, this was where power brokers made deals behind closed doors. Today, power had shifted. Layla Bennett walked in at the scheduled time. She had changed into a fresh suit, crimson blouse. The bruise on her cheek stood out against her dark skin like a brand. She wanted it visible. She carried a tablet and a leather folio stamped with her firm's logo. Already seated, County Chief Administrator Helen Vargas, a white woman in her 50s known for political survival skills. Corporation Counsel Raymond Clark, the county's top attorney, looking deeply uncomfortable. Captain Sophia Park, sitting stiffly in uniform. Judge Harlan Voss, no longer wearing his robes, looking older than he had that morning. Officer Reed Callahan, mandated to attend, radiating hostility. On speakerphone, representatives from the Attorney General's office and the State Bar. Layla was flanked by Marcus and another attorney from her firm, Kesha Rivera, who specialized in civil rights litigation. They sat down across from the county officials. Helen Vargas started, her voice carefully modulated. Ms. Bennett, we appreciate you coming in to discuss this unfortunate situation. Layla interrupted, not rudely but with absolute authority. Let me save us time. Here's what you're facing. She tapped her tablet. The room's projector screen lit up behind her. Slide 1. Case outcome analysis for courtroom 7B covering years. The data appeared. Color-coded graphs. Statistical breakdowns. Impossible to misunderstand. Black female litigants in Judge Voss's courtroom have a far lower success rate than white female litigants. Same types of cases, controlled for representation and claim strength. That's a significant disparity. That's not variance. That's a pattern. Judge Voss sputtered. This is absurd. You're cherry-picking data to... Layla didn't even look at him. Slide 2. The screen changed. Officer Reed Callahan, complaint record, multiple excessive force complaints filed over the years. All complainants black. All dispositions dismissed or ruled unfounded. Courthouse-wide average for all bailiffs over the same period is far lower. Captain Park shifted in her seat. She'd been the reviewing officer on several of those complaints. Everyone in the room knew it. Officer Callahan's record isn't an outlier. It's evidence of systemic failure to address obvious patterns of racially biased conduct. Callahan leaned forward. Those complaints were people lying to get out of... Slide 3. Layla's voice remained level, clinical, like a surgeon explaining a diagnosis. Financial exposure analysis under Title 42. U.S. Code, Section 1983. Municipalities are liable for constitutional violations stemming from official policy or custom. Your failure to discipline Officer Callahan despite multiple complaints demonstrates deliberate indifference. That's established precedent. The screen showed financial projections, compensatory damages for assault, emotional distress, and civil rights violations. Conservative estimate based on recent Georgia cases, hundreds of thousands. Punitive damages at jury discretion. Recent similar cases in this circuit averaged millions. Attorneys' fees at standard hourly rate. Estimated hundreds of hours of litigation. Total exposure if you go to trial and lose, which you will, approximately millions. Raymond Clark, the county counsel, leaned forward. Ms. Bennett, you're conflating a single incident with... I'm not done. Layla advanced to the next slide. The room went very quiet. Slide 4, Federal Investigation. Today, I filed a complaint with the FBI Civil Rights Division. I submitted a detailed report to the Georgia Judicial Qualifications Commission. I briefed both the ACLU and the Southern Poverty Law Center. Both organizations are prepared to file amicus briefs. She paused. Let that sink in. But here's what you don't know yet. I've also contacted dozens of other litigants who appeared in Judge Voss's courtroom over the past years. Many have agreed to join a class action lawsuit. That changes your exposure from millions to tens of millions plus injunctive relief, requiring systemic reform across the entire courthouse system. The silence in the room was absolute. Helen Vargas closed her eyes briefly. Raymond Clark's pen had stopped moving across his legal pad. Helen finally spoke. "What do you want, Ms. Bennett?" Layla didn't smile, didn't gloat. She leaned back slightly and spoke with the calm certainty of someone who had already won. "You have hours to choose between two paths." She distributed a bound document to each person at the table, dozens of pages, professionally formatted, already drafted by her legal team. Path 1 is litigation. I file the class action. The media coverage will be relentless. This story already has hundreds of thousands of views on Twitter. Discovery will expose every email, every complaint, every instance of institutional rot. You'll spend years in court and millions in legal fees, and you'll lose because I don't lose cases like this. My firm has a high success rate in federal civil rights litigation. Path 2 is settlement and reform. You accept the terms in that document. We resolve this before it destroys careers and bankrupts departments. You get ahead of the narrative instead of drowning in it. Raymond Clark opened the document, started reading. His expression grew more grim with each page. Layla continued. Term 1, accountability. Officer Reed Callahan is terminated immediately. No severance, no letter of recommendation. He's referred to the Georgia Peace Officer Standards and Training Council for decertification. Callahan shot to his feet. This is... Helen Vargas's voice cracked like a whip. Sit down and be quiet. Callahan sat. His face was red, but he stayed silent. Judge Voss voluntarily resigns within days. Early retirement, pension intact, a dignified exit, or he faces formal JQC disciplinary proceedings, which I will personally oversee as a commissioner. Judge Voss's head snapped up. You're on the JQC for years. I've kept a low profile, but yes, I'm on the board that can remove you from the bench permanently. The color drained from Voss's face. Captain Park receives a suspension without pay and mandatory retraining on complaint investigation protocols. She's not malicious, just complicit. She can learn. Captain Park nodded slowly. She'd known this was coming. Term 2, monetary settlement. Hundreds of thousands to me. Compensatory and punitive, plus amounts to the other class members who join. Total millions. Still less than your trial exposure. Raymond Clark was taking notes now, calculating. Helen Vargas watched Layla with something like grudging respect. Term 3. This is the important one. Layla's voice gained intensity, not volume, but weight. Systemic reform. Money doesn't change systems. Policy does. Fulton County will hire an independent civil rights auditor to review case outcomes across all courtrooms quarterly for years. Any courtroom showing disparities greater than a set percentage triggers mandatory review. Every bailiff will wear body cameras during proceedings, footage stored for years. Any complaint triggers automatic civilian review board investigation, not internal affairs. All excessive force complaints become public record via an online database updated monthly. Complete transparency. Mandatory implicit bias training for all sitting judges, hours annually. Real training, not checkbox compliance. And judges review their own case outcome data as part of the training. Finally, you'll fund a pro bono legal resource center with an annual budget. Free legal coaching for self-represented litigants because people shouldn't need a law degree to be treated with basic dignity in court. Raymond Clark looked up from the document. This is extensive. This is the minimum. Helen Vargas looked at Judge Voss. Judge, if you resign, the settlement covers any further action against you personally. Layla nodded. His pension is safe. His reputation takes a hit, but he avoids disbarment or criminal referral. Under the circumstances, that's generous. Voss's voice was hoarse. "And if I refuse?" "Then I file a formal complaint with the JQC tomorrow morning. Full disciplinary hearing, public record. Every case you've presided over gets scrutinized. Your entire career gets examined. And I promise you, we'll find more than just bias. We'll find the pattern." Callahan finally spoke, defiant to the end. "This is extortion." Layla turned to him. Her gaze was flat, cold. "Your job was to maintain order, not enforce your ego. You put your hands on an attorney in open court because you saw a black woman and assumed she was powerless. You were wrong. Sign the termination agreement, or I'll add battery charges to the federal complaint. Your choice." The room fell silent again. Helen Vargas looked around the table. "We need to caucus privately. Can you give us minutes?" "You have an hour, but my offer expires this evening. After that, I file everything." Layla stood. Marcus and Kesha followed. They walked out of conference room C with the same quiet confidence they had entered with. In the hallway, Marcus whispered, "They're going to take it." "I know." "How do you know?" "Because I gave them a way out that doesn't destroy them. They're scared, but I offered them survival. People always choose survival when you give them the option." Minutes later, Helen Vargas called Layla's cell phone. "We'll sign." The documents were signed in conference room C. No ceremony, no handshakes, just signatures on legal paper that would change how an entire county courthouse operated. Officer Reed Callahan cleared his desk by evening. Badge and weapons surrendered to Captain Park. No farewell gathering. No thank you for your service speech. He walked out of the courthouse he had worked in for years, carrying a cardboard box and a termination letter. His police certification review was scheduled soon. He'd likely never wear a badge again. By evening, Judge Voss had drafted his resignation letter. It would be announced the following morning, citing health reasons. The legal community would read between the lines. Everyone always did. His decades-long career was over. He'd keep his pension, but he'd never preside over another case, never wear the robes again, never wield that kind of power. That evening, local news led with the story, not the slap itself, but the settlement, the reforms, the systemic changes coming to Fulton County. Channel 5's legal correspondent broke it down. This isn't just about one attorney being assaulted. According to documents filed this afternoon, this is about a pattern of discrimination that's been documented over years. The settlement includes some of the most comprehensive courthouse reforms we've seen in Georgia. Layla held a press conference on the courthouse steps. The bruise on her face was still visible under the television lights. She stood at a podium surrounded by microphones. Marcus and Kesha flanked her. Behind them, a group of the dozens of litigants she had interviewed stood in solidarity. Today, Fulton County took responsibility for systemic failures. Real change requires courage from institutions, not just individuals. I'm grateful the county leadership chose accountability over denial. A reporter shouted from the crowd, "Ms. Bennett, did you plan this? Did you engineer getting assaulted?" Layla's expression hardened. "No one plans to be assaulted. No one wants to be struck in a courtroom while seeking justice. But when violence happens, you have a choice. Accept it and move on, or dismantle the structures that enabled it. I chose the latter." What about the other litigants, the class action members? Dozens of people have agreed to participate. Each will receive compensation, but more importantly, each of them showed tremendous courage in coming forward. Their stories matter. Their experiences documented a pattern that could no longer be ignored. Are you worried about retaliation? I'm a sitting member of the Georgia Judicial Qualifications Commission. I'm incoming chair of the Thurgood Marshall Leadership Council. I'm senior partner at a civil rights litigation firm. If someone wants to retaliate against me, they're welcome to try. The press conference lasted minutes. Layla answered questions directly without evasion. She was calm, factual, and absolutely clear about what had happened and what would change. Afterward, Gerald, the retired postal worker who had been in the courtroom that morning, approached her. "Ms. Bennett, I just wanted to say thank you. I've been in that courthouse a dozen times over the years, witnessed things that weren't right, never knew what to do about it." Layla shook his hand. "You recorded what happened. You stood up when you saw injustice. That matters more than you know." He smiled. "I'm glad I was there. Glad I could help." That night, Layla's story went national. CNN, MSNBC, and other networks covered it. The footage of Callahan slapping her played on loop, but so did footage of the press conference, of Layla speaking with quiet authority about systemic change. Social media exploded with reactions. Some people praised her strategy. Others questioned whether she had manipulated the situation. The debate raged across platforms. But in hundreds of courtrooms across the country, people were paying attention. Public defenders, solo practitioners, self-represented litigants, people who had experienced their own versions of what Layla had documented. They watched, and they started asking questions about their own local courts. Within weeks, civil rights organizations in other states reached out to Layla's firm. They wanted to replicate her methodology, use data to expose patterns, file strategic test cases. The model was spreading. The Thurgood Marshall Leadership Council announced Layla as their new chair at a gala that weekend. The ballroom was packed with attorneys, judges, and civil rights leaders. When Layla took the stage, she received a standing ovation that lasted minutes. Her acceptance speech was brief. Power isn't what you're born with. It's what you build brick by brick, case by case. And when the system tries to crush you, you don't just survive. You redesign the system. That's the work ahead of us. Thank you for trusting me to lead it. Months later, Congressman John Lewis's former chief of staff introduced the Courtroom Accountability Act in the House of Representatives. The bill required federal funding for state courts to be contingent on bias auditing and complaint transparency. It was modeled directly on Layla's settlement terms with Fulton County. The bill stalled in committee, but the conversation had shifted. Courthouse reform was suddenly a national topic. Layla returned to her regular caseload, the pro bono wrongful termination case she had been working on before all this, a housing discrimination suit against a landlord in Savannah, 3 police misconduct cases in various stages of litigation. Her firm hired more associates to handle the increased demand. Life moved forward, but something fundamental had changed. In courtroom 7B, now presided over by Judge Vanessa Okoro, a black woman with years of judicial experience, things operated differently. Body cameras recorded everything. Pro se litigants received information packets about their rights. Case outcomes were tracked and published quarterly. The system wasn't perfect, but it was better, and that was the point. One afternoon, Layla received a letter from a woman in Mississippi. "I saw what you did. I'm a teacher who was discriminated against at work. I didn't think I could fight back. Your story made me realize I could. I hired an attorney. We're filing suit next month. Thank you for showing me that we don't have to accept injustice." Layla put the letter in a folder with dozens of others like it, real-life stories from people finding their own courage, their own power. She smiled and got back to work. Months later, the Fulton County Courthouse was a different place. Every bailiff wore a body camera. The small black devices were visible on their uniforms, recording constantly during court proceedings. The footage archive was public, searchable by date, officer, and courtroom. In the first months, excessive force complaints dropped significantly. The Pro Bono Legal Resource Center opened on the courthouse's 3rd floor. Offices, volunteer attorneys, law students from local universities. They had served hundreds of litigants in the first months. Success rates for self-represented plaintiffs rose system-wide. Quarterly bias audits were published online. Now, Courtroom 7B under Judge Okoro showed outcome parity across all racial demographics. Other courtrooms flagged for disparities. Investigations were ongoing. Judges whose courtrooms showed patterns were required to undergo additional training and review. The reforms Layla had demanded weren't just policy changes on paper. They were functioning systems that changed how justice operated daily. Officer Reed Callahan worked night shifts at a warehouse now. His decertification had gone through. He had applied for security jobs at different companies. All turned him down once they ran his background. The incident followed him everywhere. He was bitter, but silent. The settlement's non-disclosure agreement kept him from talking to the press. Former Judge Harlan Voss played golf 3 times a week. He had gained weight, looked older. At the country club, former colleagues were polite but distant. No one wanted to be associated with him. He told himself he had been treated unfairly, that political correctness had ruined his career. But late at night, he knew the truth. Layla Bennett was profiled in major publications. The attorney who turned assault into reform. How one slap exposed systemic racism in Georgia courts. Layla Bennett's playbook for fighting institutional bias. Her firm's caseload tripled. She hired more attorneys, including 2 who had lost cases in Voss's courtroom years earlier. They understood the mission personally. The Thurgood Marshall Leadership Council launched a multi-million-dollar judicial accountability fund. It provided free legal support to litigants experiencing courtroom discrimination. In the first year, they took on cases across states. These black stories, these real stories of everyday people fighting systems that tried to crush them, were becoming a movement. Layla spoke at Harvard Law School. The auditorium was packed. Students sat in the aisles during Q&A. Someone asked, "Do you regret going into that courtroom alone, knowing what would happen?" Layla was silent for several seconds. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that I had to be struck to force people to pay attention, but I don't regret fighting because if I hadn't, dozens of other people would still believe the system is unbeatable. Now they know better. Now we all know better." Violence is often invisible until it's captured on camera. Bias is often denied until it's proven with data. And justice is often delayed until someone with power chooses to fight, not for themselves alone, but for everyone who comes after. Layla Bennett didn't just win her case. She changed the rules. Her story became one of those touching stories that inspires real action, one of those real-life stories that proves systems can be transformed when courage meets strategy. But here's the truth. Her story is one of thousands. Right now, someone is sitting in a courtroom being dismissed, belittled, or worse, simply because of how they look. Maybe it's happened to you. If it has, here's what you can do. Share this story. Let the algorithm force this conversation into spaces that would rather ignore it. Comment below. Tell your story. Your words matter. Your experience counts. Support systemic reform. Organizations like the ACLU, Southern Poverty Law Center, and NAACP Legal Defense Fund fight these battles every single day. Even $5 helps. And subscribe to this channel. We tell stories the mainstream media often ignores. Stories of power, resistance, and change. Stories like Layla's because Layla Bennett didn't fight back with fists. She fought back with facts, strategy, and an unshakable belief that the system can change if we force it to. The question is, will you force it? Drop a comment, hit that subscribe button, and let's keep this conversation alive. Because change doesn't happen when we're silent. It happens when we refuse to be.